Good Tuesday morning, everybody. Welcome to the Volquest podcast. I'm Eric Kane with Rob Lewis, Brent Hubbs, and Austin Price. As always, a big thank you and a shout out to Exterior Home Solutions for making this coverage possible. For a free estimate today, give them a call at 865-524-5888, or you can visit them online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. Got a whole lot to get into today. The fall camp portion here in the month of August is starting to wrap up for Tennessee football, shifting more towards a run-through for game week preparations before actual game week next week. So a lot was said with Josh Heupel in his Monday press conference, and we'll get to some of that here in a moment. But first, I want to ask you guys surprises of fall camp. They can be good or bad. Brent Hubbs, what's a surprise for fall camp for you?
For me, it's the transfers in general. I think that's the biggest thing that steps out for me, and we'll see if they hit on all of them the way it seems right now. But you had Dante Thornton was kind of the only guy anybody sort of talked about in spring, and you wondered about John Campbell. John Campbell looks totally different to me now. I think he's playing with a lot more confidence. He looks to be in better shape. I think if you got everybody and put them on a truth detector over there, Keenan Peely may be the biggest surprise of any of them because he's been better than they thought he would be. Gabe Jeudy-Lally he's a better corner than Tennessee's played with at times the last decade, and he's probably not going to start for Tennessee. But he's going to help this team along the way. So for me, I think it's the impact of the transfers and what they're going to be able to do for this team. That's the first one that jumps out to me, Eric.
Well, what about you? Anybody, any player or position specifically that has jumped out, good or bad?
Well, I mean, I like what Hubbard has to say about hitting on so many transfers. I mean, I think the percentage of what looks like hits I think that's a good story. This one's not nearly as big, but I'm surprised. I mean, I guess not. I mean, Chaz Nimrod and Caleb Webb both made some noise in the spring, but it sounds like the last two times Josh Heupel has talked, he's mentioned both those kids as played in the rotation. I mean, by name specifically. He wasn't asked about Nimrod or Webb, but when he's been asked about the wide receiver rotation the last two times, he's mentioned those kids. So, I don't think they're going to, play a ton, but it's a little surprising to me to think that, after 2 years of them playing, 3 or, maybe playing 4 when Squirrel, or Ramel pushed in there, that could they really play 6 at wideout? And again, that's not as big of a story as the transfers. But to me, since the tight rotation at receiver has been, kind of an ongoing thing we've all talked about. If they really play 6 guys routinely out there, I think that would be noteworthy.
I mean, for me, I don't know if there is a big surprise. I think what Hubbs hit on is valid. I think what Rob just hit on is very valid just because they've not played a huge rotation. I think Omar Norman Lott continuing his upward trend. I wouldn't call that a surprise, but I think it's a good thing to see. This is a defense that, again, that I think, should take a step this year. And you hope that some of these guys that you are hoping to see ascend do just that. And then I think the surprise kind of wears off after that.
I think for me, it's the front seven. You knew you were going to be deeper on the defensive line. You knew you were going to be much deeper at linebacker. And, that offensive line held its own in pass pro in the second scrimmage. But it seems like, in everything you hear and take in some of the comments from Heupel and some of these other coaches, it seems like they really like that front seven, the depth, the options, and how it's really going to be a rotation with a whole lot of guys who are going to be playing in games. And that, again, the defensive line's been that way with Rodney Gardner, but that's something you haven't seen at linebacker. And so
they couldn't.
Yeah, exactly. You had 3 guys. And so for that defense to take a step, like you mentioned, Austin, I think this is huge in that regard, to have a whole lot of bodies that will play, stay fresh, and that defense is going to be playing an awful lot of snaps to begin with. Now, we all kind of focused on something good, and nobody kind of gave a bad example, if you will.
Here we go.
Let's transition, all right, to the offensive line. And we knew there were questions coming in, Brent. We knew that Tennessee had to find a left guard. We knew that Tennessee had to find a right tackle. So it's not like, not having solidified 5 up there is a surprise right now, because it's not. But Josh Heupel did say in Monday's press conference, hey, they're going to be a bit of a rotation there at some of those positions. Continuity-wise, you never really want that on the offensive line, but it is something that they've done in years past, and they did it at left tackle last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge shock to me or a surprise to me that they're not settled there. I mean, I thought that it would be one of those things that would settle itself out through the first few weeks of the season. And again, I think it's important to note that Glenn Ellerbe has a history of intentionally having a rotation on the offensive line, which is a bit of outside the box for what you kind of hear through the years, right, Rob? I mean, it was all about continuity. You got to get your fives so they're in step together, and they know what the other one's doing before it happens, and everybody's comfortable beside each other. You go back to the UCF days with Glenn Ellerbe. I mean, they played routinely 6-7 offensive linemen by design. And hey, second quarter, almost like the running back getting the third series of the game or whatever. There were times that they would go with a different guard in the second quarter, not because the matchup was bad, just because they were in a rotation there. So I don't think it's a huge concern that they're going to rotate, because it's not a surprise to me. The question is who ascends and becomes, who is a part of that rotation? Because right now you got 3 guys at right tackle, you got like 4 bodies at left guard. Kind of what does it look like when they whittle it down to 6 or 7, and when do they get there?
These coaches have forgotten more football than I'll ever know. But also, and again, I know they've done this in the past, and I know they did this last year at left tackle with the number 1 offense in the country. But when you talk about rotation on the offensive line, that just doesn't sit right, does it? I mean, from a football standpoint, that's just something that it's unique, and it's not really easy to hear, I guess.
Well, no, I mean, I think ultimately you'd love to have the continuity, but I don't think Tennessee, has that luxury right now. And I think that left guard spot's going to be a revolving door until they kind of figure it out. Who I'm not going to say that they're going to be Theo Jackson, but who is that Theo Jackson type player that is kind of overlooked, and then all of a sudden, boom, he has a really nice senior year. I mean, is that Ollie Lane shifting back to left guard once Cooper gets healthy? Is that Jackson Lampley? I think they'll start Andre Carrick, because I think for whatever reason that's kind of the direction they're going to go. I'm not so sure that that's where it ends up, but I think that there's multiple options there. And again, I think somebody has to grab the bull by the horns and lock down that spot if Tennessee is going to have the season they hope to have.
And it's almost like the guard is the conversation, Rob, right? Because it is just such an unknown. Whereas, sure, there's 2 or 3 guys repping at right tackle right now, but we've seen those guys play, and they did this all last year. Now they got to flip over and do it on the other side, which is no easy task. But it's almost like, okay, we have faith that right tackle spot's going to be all right, because they know this offense. It's just it's such an unknown at guard right now. And I do think that something will help with that, Rob, is when obviously Cooper Mays comes back, Ollie Lane can shift, and that rotation should get a little smaller.
Yeah, I mean, so much depends on Cooper's health, and when can you get Ollie Lane back there? And and I think Ollie's a guy that people should have confidence in. I'm not saying he's an all SEC performer, but he's played a lot of football in this league, has bounced around, has been here a long time. But Addison Nichols, unknown. Andre Carrick, has played a little bit at Texas, but unknown. And it's just ironic, because going back to June or even July, certainly when we started really talking to previewing fall camp, I know Brent, everybody was on it, but Brent was on the train, of Cooper Mays is can't get hurt, and here we are, dealing with that. And if he comes back in speedy fashion, it could actually be the kind of thing that is a benefit for you down the road. No, I'm not saying he's got to get back quick. I mean, you don't want his first game back at Florida, but having gone through all this in fall camp and had to juggle so much stuff could actually be something that works in their favor 6, 7, 8 games into the season.
In a perfect world, Hubbard, this would have been Addison Nichols or Vyson Lang runs with this. They become the starter until Cooper gets back, and then the guy who's the heir apparent has reps leading into whenever that person ascends to being the starting center once Cooper's playing career is done. That looks like it's not going to be the case. It's going to be a senior on the last year of his eligibility with Ollie Lane. So again, I think a little bit of a missed opportunity there with Cooper going down, but I guess something they'll have to manage.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think it's a situation. It's probably unfair to ask for Vyson Lang to be ready right now.
It is 100%. That's not fair to him.
But I think if you can get in a game, no offense to the Governors of Austin Peay, but if you can get into that game and you get Vyson Lang, some reps at center, what a great luxury that would be there. Maybe Addison Nichols is not a center. Maybe that's just not his position. I don't know that. Okay,
I'm just force that to him. Like he had never played that till he got here.
Right, yeah. and maybe that's just not his. Maybe that's not his thing. So I don't know. I mean, maybe he's better suited at guard. We'll have to see as time goes. But obviously, when you have the injury to Cooper Mays, you're not sure exactly when he's going to be back. You got to put the guy out there that can make your offense go the best that it can at the center position. And clearly, they believe that is Ollie Lane at this point. And I mean, Addison Nichols had all the spring, he had all summer to work there. Opportunity in the fall camp, maybe didn't take advantage of it the way he needed to. But maybe center's not his spot. We'll just have to see as time goes on. I just think that we're going to see them rotate some guys. Now, it's easy to do the first couple of games, right? Because you're unsettled for game one. So you're sort of doing it out of necessity in game one. Game two, you're going to do it out of the opportunity. The question is going to be when you get into a night game in Gainesville, Florida, and it gets loud, are you really going to play 7 offensive linemen? Or are you going to go in there and going, all right, we're pretty comfortable with here's our best 5 right now. We're going to play these 5. I don't know. I mean, we'll see how the next few weeks plays out.
That missed opportunity about the backup center, Austin. I mean, the same could be said for last year. The same could be said for 2021. I mean, Tennessee's not had a backup center since Cooper Mays was the backup in 2020.
You also knew that the last 2 years, Jerome Carvin was sitting there at left guard and, could slide over and had years of eligibility left. This is different because, Ollie, again, is in the last year of eligibility. And so thus, again, it's fine. I mean, I don't think it hurts or helps or whatever. Like, I think like I said, though, in a perfect world, one of your younger guys, and Hubbs brings up a good point. Austin P, you get up in that game, the guy that needs to go in as a younger guy who, needs the reps just in case, they need to be able to be getting in there at some point this year.
You flip over to the defense side of the football. You look at that secondary. Josh Heupel also mentioned on Monday's press conference that Tennessee's going to play a whole lot of guys in the back end. And boy, does that sound good, right? Tennessee played a whole lot of cornerbacks last year. They had to. Tennessee didn't play a whole lot of safeties. Brent Hubbs, can Tennessee have a true rotation back there with the quality of options that they have for those 5 spots in the defensive secondary?
I think it's easy to say they're going to have a rotation at corner because I think you've got a bunch of guys who have some ability. I think Brandon Turnage can play in this league. Kamal Haddon, Danico Slaughter, Gabe Judy Lawley has played in this league. Then you got those young guys we haven't even talked about, plus Warren Burrell. So you've got a lot of bodies there. And I think you could see some rotation there. I've got to see it to believe it at the safety spot, right? I mean, I think Wesley Walker's locked in. It appears that Jalen McCullough is completely locked in. Now, you talk about surprises in camp, your first question out of the gate. Andre Turrentine is a guy who was left for dead pretty much by a lot of people in spring practice. I mean, his mind wasn't where it needed to be. His focus wasn't where it needed to be. And it didn't seem like he was going anywhere. Wesley Walker's hurt much of fall camp, Austin. Opportunity abound. There's a guy who's taken advantage of his opportunity. Does that mean he starts? No, I don't think he starts. But he is a guy who has created some confidence not only for himself, but with the coaches in him that in case he's called upon or they want to rotate, then maybe there's some comfort level with Andre Turrentine. He's taken full advantage of this fall camp, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you look at Andre, and again, I think, you start, just kind of, narrowing the focus a little bit, especially as an older guy. It's one thing to kind of have some, things you get distracted by as a freshman or sophomore. But now that you're third and fourth year into college, the earth's getting big in the window, to quote the great Apollo 13. But I think it is for some of these older guys. Like, it's time to focus. Hey, do I want something beyond college football? And if I do, then I better get it together and get honed in and focused on what we're trying to do and get on the field and put some tape out there for NFL teams.
What's going on over there at the Price household? Max is furious. Somebody walking by?
The thing, Eric, to answer your question, though, again, it's one thing to talk about playing a bunch of guys, and Rob, this. I mean, it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to to do it. And it'll be easy to do. I think easier to do in those first couple of games, but the proof will be in the pudding when you start to get into conference play. How much do you fall back and just go with 5, or do you really rotate a bunch of guys back there? I'll be curious to see that, because it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it.
And again, and Josh Heupel made note, some of these guys who have been out a little bit, returning to practice, getting back in the fold, guys like Wesley Walker, Tamarian McDonald, they were back in full pads and going through practice last week. But you can also have some options to where maybe not right now because you're focused on getting ready for the opener, but Tamarian McDonald's a safety. He's a star, but he's also a safety. Potentially you could slot him back there if Warren Burrell is a guy that you can count on that has taken also advantage of this fall camp and these opportunities to get some playing time. That could be another option as well. So that might not be an option, Rob, for game number 1 of the season, but moving forward, week 5, week 6, potentially all this cross training could benefit Tennessee in the secondary.
Yeah, you just have a bunch of guys that have played a bunch of football. And we've talked about it. You don't have anybody that you can point to and say, man, that guy's he's a lock, top 3-round draft pick, or he's a first team All SEC player. But man, they've got I said it the other day, they've got 10 guys by my count that have started games. Some of those were by absolute necessity thrown to the dogs in that bowl game in Music City 2 years ago. But you still Gabe Judy in there. That makes 11 guys that have started an SEC football game. So there's tons of options, and like you said, Eric, guys have played different spots. I think Warren Burrell playing inside and that star is intriguing, but man, you got a lot of guys that have to prove it. Like AP said, contract years for a lot of guys in the secondary.
Willie Martinez's room is like Baskin Robbins. There's 31 different flavors. They just got to figure out to me it's what's steady. There might be a guy that flashes or two, but they need some consistency and some athleticism, and whoever can provide that combination is the guys I would roll with.
Yeah, steady makes me a little bit nervous because then that gets back into, he knows where to be all the time.
Well, I'm saying steady and be there. Combination of steady and that. Like Gabe Judy Lally is the guy that I think of like good athlete. Is he the best athlete in the secondary? Probably not, but good athlete, runs well, and has the mental part of it.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
Does that make sense? I totally understand how that came across.
Yeah, but
you got to be more athletic. Everyone knows where I stand on the back end of the defense. And
I'm with Hubbard. I know what you're saying, AP, but when I hear steady, I think of somebody steadily giving up an 8-yard cushion every snap.
Yeah.
Well, my thing is like Kamal Haddon's got a lot of athleticism, but then you go back to that South Carolina game and he just chirp the whole time, and to me was a liability out there. Now he's had a good off season. We'll see if it translates. Again, when he flashes, Kamal Haddon, very, very capable. Then his down is don't really need him out there. He's a detriment.
How's his health, AP?
He should be fine.
Yeah, you're right. Kamal, to me, the South Carolina thing is not as bad, other than it was awful to chirp while you're getting beat. All 11 defenders were liabilities that night for Tennessee. They couldn't stop anybody anywhere. Now, the Miami or the Orange Bowl game, some of that chirping there, he got away with a couple things that probably could have been flagged on him. He's got to be under control. He can't be a liability that way, 100%. Again, that's a guy that a lot of us didn't think would ultimately end up being in this program. But he was the best corner coming out of spring, and he's kind of still been there as one of the top corners. But the thing that you have for Kamal Haddon is there's somebody who can take Kamal Haddon's spot. Last year, there wasn't anybody to take Kamal Haddon's spot. Okay, yeah, you didn't like him running his mouth, but who are you going to play? Right? You're beat up and banged up, but he was clearly your most athletic option before you put the Nico Slaughter in there in the Kentucky game. If he becomes any kind of early liability in a game, doesn't play well, there's about 3 or 4 guys you can plug and play in his spot, which I think is of great benefit for the corners and kind of keeping everybody under control emotionally, which was a hard thing to do for a couple guys last year.
Real quick, how are those young guys? 5 freshmen, 3 corners, 2 safeties. When we're talking about this rotation, these guys pushing everything, we've seen some of these guys flash a little bit. What are we hearing about the freshman defensive backs?
Well, I mean, I think what Austin was saying earlier, I mean, the athletic ability is the first thing that jumps out. I mean, Ricky Gibson's a heck of an athlete. Jordan Matthews is a heck of an athlete. I think Christian Connors has closed this fall camp as well as any of those freshmen have at the corner position. So, I mean, I think when you start there, you feel really good about those guys. The blessing is that they're not handing them a starting uniform. You know, they're not giving them a uniform and say, "Hey, you're a starter. Figure it out on Saturday." Like they did Alante Taylor, who's a receiver that they flipped over there and said, figure it out. Bryce Thompson and some of these other guys. So, the blessing is they can bring those guys along at a steady pace as opposed to just putting them out there and letting them sink or swim, basically what they did with some other guys.
All right, so a lot going on right now. Tennessee's wrapping up the contact portion of fall camp, kind of getting into game week preparations for Virginia and of course, the start of the schedule. We'll get into more on that. A big-time commit for Tennessee football happened yesterday as well, and Tennessee Chancellor Plowman sat down with Brent Hubbs of Volquest.com. We'll get into a little bit more of that here as we continue on the Volquest podcast. But real quick, I want to say thank you and give a quick shout out to a proud sponsor in Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite event should never be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy those tickets for sporting events, of course, but also concerts, festivals, theater, all near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets with their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped up for the fun that you are going to have. They have flash deals and last-minute tickets available over at Game Time as well. Easy to find. You can go and buy the tickets for every kind of event in your area. You can see an image of your seats before purchasing. It's the lowest price guaranteed, even cancellation protection, job loss protection, and all that and more over at Game Time. So forget planning months in advance. All right, Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. You can get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concert, comedy, theater, and a whole lot more. What I need you to do right now, and I encourage you to do right now, is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code VOLS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, you can create an account, redeem code VOLS for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And as always, a big shout out to our title sponsor of the Volquest podcast. That is Exterior Home Solutions.
You know, life happens, and damage to your home can be extremely stressful. That's why it's important to find someone who offers efficient, quality work with financing options. Exterior Home Solutions, they value not only family, but community. And they're who I call when life happens, and you should too.
A big thank you to Exterior Home Solutions for making all this coverage possible. It was a big-time Monday evening. The General's quarters, and for Tennessee recruiting, Austin Price, highly rated 4-star edge Jordan Ross made his commitment to Tennessee. I know we've watched your videos and we've read the impact analysis from Matt, but what is he bringing to the class of 2024?
For Jordan, I think that, he's liked Tennessee for a long time. He and his mom had a great time on the official visit, but they kind of had it in their mind. They wanted to take this thing the distance for whatever reason. Like, I think that was kind of the notion that they had. And then it kind of started to dwindle. And it was like all of a sudden it was October, September. Then next thing you know, it ends up in August. And, for Jordan, you're getting a long, like his length is really, really impressive. Big defensive end that can come off the edge. Again, I think there's a lot of versatility there with Jordan Ross. I mean, Hype's a big guy, and look at me, he's a lot taller than Heupel is. And, I think that the upside with him is pretty great. So, again, Jordan, big gift for Tennessee. Anytime you can get a top 50 player nationally on Monday night. Now the job is to continue to recruit him like he's not committed, Hover, because, nobody's going to stop recruiting him. And, I've said for a while, this thing just feels like it'll have 3 or 4 more turns. Maybe it'll be quiet all the way till December, but, it just has that feel to it.
Yeah, in my conversations with his mom, a little bit about the timeline standpoint, she felt like it was important. This was early on, okay? But he made 6 unofficial visits to Tennessee. So she felt like it was important that they see it all the way to December so they could kind of see how a team's season went, to see if there were any changes, if they were going to, not just a head coaching change, but other staff changes or this, that, and the other. she felt like going early was locking him into something that could end up being somewhat of a question mark, if you will. I think they feel comfortable with that now, and I think he was ready to get it over with. I think he wanted it off his plate for his senior year and get that behind him, and they felt comfortable with Tennessee. Now, Mom has said once he's done, he's done. Now we'll see, how that changes. We all know how the recruiting process works, but initially she wanted him to wait because she wanted to make sure he had all of his options all the way till December, because you never knew what happened. But I think the more they conversed with schools in Tennessee, the more comfortable they felt with the stability at Tennessee. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, and again, I think when you look at the teams that were his finalists, Alabama's not making a change, and to me the one big question mark was Florida, just because you look at Florida, and depending on the season they have, who knows how quick the trigger finger is on Napier down there. But I mean, I get one to hold out, but I mean, most of the teams that were in on him at one point or another are pretty stable.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Kelly wasn't going anywhere.
Like, Nick could retire tomorrow or whatever, but most feel and look pretty stable.
Yeah, agreed.
Jordan Ross, he becomes the 20th commit for the class of 2024. He's the second highest rated Tennessee commits behind Mike Matthews now in the class. He is the 13th four-star commit, the 10th defender, the second edge in the class, along with Lindstrom. And I know some of those guys are versatile down there, but you look at this class, AP, it's well-rounded, and this is obviously one of those big boy battles that you always reference and saying, hey, Tennessee needs to win a couple. This is one of them.
Well, this one, Danny Okoye, if you can close Danny Okoye and Nasir Smith to go along with Jordan Ross, Kellen Lindstrom, and then, obviously, you look in state, down in Chattanooga. I mean, I think ultimately that's, Carson Gentle was one of the first kind of fire starters for this class. And, it feels like he committed 14 years ago.
Yeah.
So, the defensive line class, not too bad. Again, you've still got to close out Danny Okoye. You still got to close out Nasir Smith. And again, if Nasir Smith has a really good year, does Georgia double back around to him? What happens with a team like Auburn? There are going to be some twists and turns. I think that's just the nature of recruiting, in this era. And again, how much, do you have to really kind of just, kind of hit and hope in some of these recruitments, because you just never know how they're going to go.
Well, then you got to see what they finish with on the offensive side at wide receiver, but when you start to look at this, I mean, there are not big boards left because Tennessee's kind of narrowing down in their focus. Yeah. I mean, you got Cole at linebacker they would love to close with. They need another linebacker in this class. So what does that look like here in another month, when you know what his decision, less than a month when you know his decision, and you see where you go from there. But a lot of that hay's in the barn, and this is just a new world of recruiting. I mean, you better have most of your class built and completed by September 1, because there's just not a lot of options left out there. A lot of guys are just gone and done because everybody wants it done really before they get into the heart of their senior season.
At AP, I would assume just they get Ross, they'd still love to have Okoye, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, that doesn't change anything. Yeah,
that's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, he's uber coveted by this staff. They love Danny Okoye.
AP, kind of random.
And then you got Cam Fountain. I mean, I said the other day, and I don't know if I said this on the podcast or if it was just general conversation talking with Hubs or who, but I said at the time, the amount of NIL that would go into getting a Waneri, what does that look like if you got a three-headed monster of Ross, Okoye, and Cam Fountain? Sometimes three bodies, to me are way more impressive, way better chance to be a hit than the one. And I think we all think Waneri is going to be a freak, right? But at the same time, you just never know in this game. So trying to flip Cameron Fountain, getting Ross in the boat last night, and then of course trying to land Okoye after his official visit here for the South Carolina game.
It's kind of random, but I want to ask about Edwin Spillman. Lipscomb had that huge game against IMG last week. Matt did an awesome job on his notebook, highlighted Edwin Spillman. But Spillman had 12 tackles. He laid the thunder to a fellow Tennessee commit, Jonathan Eccles. But you look at his rating, he's kind of down there a little bit. But Edwin Spillman, obviously already in this class. He's a cornerstone of this class. He's been one of the highest rated players in the state for a couple of years now. It sounds like he and a couple other ones already off to a good start of their senior seasons.
Well, for Edwin, he's gradually went down in ranking with us for whatever reason. But Charles Power was there in attendance, and one would imagine that with him playing that way against a really, really talented IMG team, that potentially his rating is going to go back up, and rightfully so. Edwin, packs the punch. Again, you look at who coveted Edwin Spillman late, and it's some upper echelon college football playoff routine contenders. And so to me, that's where I always go with it is who wants you, where can you go, and I think that's what matters.
Well, and I love his frame that you have to work with. I mean, he
Yeah.
comes in with really good size. We've seen that with Arian Carter and T. Lander and those guys looking the part when they get here. Edwin Spillman is going to be 225 pounds, 230 pounds when he arrives on campus. Really like the frame that he's got to work with, because I think that physically there's a lot more to gain and grow with Edwin Spillman. And he obviously plays a physical brand of football right now.
Well, you look right there at the where he's ranked in the state, 8th in the On3 industry ranking, On3 overall 9th, 24/7 has him as 3rd, ESPN 7th, and then Rivals has him as 5th. And I'm blind, so I'm having to squint here. He's definitely a top 5 player in the state for me. Like, to me, that's not even in discussion. Again, I would argue the Tennessee State rankings with just about anybody, because I've seen most of these kids. So's Matt, and feel like we have a pretty fair judge of talent. I can't judge everybody, but I could probably judge the state pretty well.
Last thing I want to hit on here on this edition of the Volquest podcast, Brent, you did a Q&A with Tennessee Chancellor Plowman, and that came out Monday morning. Really enjoyed going through that, reading that, and a theme throughout that is essentially she never thought she'd be this close and this intertwined with college athletics, but she understands that, especially at Tennessee, it is so important to be in there, and that's something that she enjoys, going back to having 2 boys and just being a mom. Enjoyed that, reading through that Monday morning. What were some of the highlights in speaking with Plowman?
Well, I went in with the notion of one thing. I wanted to know why she likes sports. And then kind of where it went from there is where it went from there. And obviously was going to touch on the NCAA stuff as well. And she was very gracious with her time. I think she gave a pretty good account and pretty good picture of kind of her mental makeup with athletics and why she likes athletics. Probably my couple of biggest takeaways was just kind of her candor with the NCAA stuff when you talk about potentially settling with Jeremy Pruitt and where that thought process was and the stress that she dealt with throughout that whole process. And then maybe the biggest takeaway that didn't get a lot of talk, because there was a lot of talk about her visiting with former players and all that, which had been out there a little bit. That wasn't necessarily groundbreaking. I thought it was fascinating that she said when she interviewed for the job that multiple people, including the governor, and a lot of people on the board of trustees and a lot of people on the university side, asked her opinion of athletics and where she thought athletics was. And if you're a Tennessee fan, that should warm your heart, because there were decision makers who got together and said, it's time the boat start rowing in the same direction. We need some alignment here. And you can't have alignment if the leader of your Knoxville campus doesn't have an affection for sports and doesn't get sports and doesn't understand the value of sports, which she clearly does. And so that was something I was unaware of, kind of the emphasis and the discussion point of athletics through the interview process that she had was one thing that kind of caught my eye a little off the beaten path, if you will, in my conversation with her. But I find her to be very interesting. I've been critical of her. She knows I've been critical of her. We talked and joked about it.
She read it.
Yeah, we talked about some of that stuff, off the record as well. But I think, she's done a lot of really good things. Nobody's perfect. When you get into management situations and leadership moves, you have to make quick decisions, and people are going to question those decisions, and they always will. But standing where Tennessee's at right now, it's hard to say she's made many bad decisions, because Tennessee's in as good of a place as they've been in a long time when it comes to the university and athletics together.
one of my favorite parts about it was, and again, we'll kind of wrap up this conversation, but Brent, you pretty much just said, and it's something that you said on these podcasts and on the board, the last 30 months, you told her straight up, hey, I was blown away with how you were so bold at that press conference. And essentially she was just like, well, I wanted everybody to know what the heck was going on. I love that back and forth and everything that you can check out over Volquest.com.
Yeah, and we've talked about it a little bit before. She still is a little bit surprised that people consider that to be bold. And I said, nobody sits in a press conference and admits guilt to that degree, basically, is what she did. In some ways, though, Austin and Rob, it almost united the Tennessee fan base because it took away any doubt about whether where Jeremy Pruitt fit or didn't fit, or Philip Fulmer fit or didn't fit. It was kind of like, okay, we're all in this thing together. Here's kind of the villain, right? The guy you're firing and his people are the villain. Let's go get this thing fixed. I don't think that was her intent, but that's a little bit what it created. Is it eliminated some of the divide that could have potentially been out there?
I think you make a good point because the villain thing, and also I think it gave Tennessee fans. I mean, she was like, this is ugly, but this is also not what this program is about, and we're gonna get it right. Tennessee fans didn't have any reason to trust her, believe her at that point, that early in the relationship, but she was willing to sit there and take that on, and I think as Tennessee got further and further into it, and when you saw her hire Danny White, and you saw Danny White hire Josh Heupel, and you saw that. Tennessee fans saw that they weren't going to lay down and take a bowl ban. They weren't going to lay down and pay Jeremy Pruitt $12 million. I think it just I think she's earned a lot of credibility in the last 2 years.
Yeah, and that credibility came home in July when they got the results that they needed to get and wanted to get with the NCAA. It wasn't perfect, but there was going to be punishment. There was guilt there, but they minimized that. I think the other thing, too, in part of that press conference, it was a little bit easier to do some of that stuff because your football team had been bad on the field. Jeremy Pruitt wasn't popular because they weren't winning. Had that been 7-3, had that been a winning football team, that's a total different conversation. It was easy to kind of go that way, too, with some of your bluntness, if you will, because you would just come off and look like a team that just wasn't. That something was off and it wasn't going in the right direction. So that probably played a little bit into that as well.
A lot of good stuff over there. Monday morning, it's still there under the football news. Go check it out. A Q&A with Tennessee Chancellor Plowman with Brent Hubbs. A lot of great stuff there. One of my favorite things we do here at Volquest, and Brent and Austin, everybody does a great job doing it. Getting these specialty program type things, content items, right? Danny White a couple of weeks ago, Donnie Plowman, and Austin Price. Game week is next week, and we're not stopping. There's going to be a ton of special content for game week coming up.
Well, there'll be a great content bright and early Monday morning. Really super excited to continue what we started last year as we head into game week. And then Thursday, we will have, the thing I've been teasing out on Twitter. We've got, an important addition to the Volquest.com game week lineup. This will be the one thing on Monday is a one-off. The thing on Thursday will be every Thursday during the season, all the way through bowl season. So really excited to kind of, it's going to be great. And to quote the great Paul Heyman from WWE, that's not a prediction, it's a spoiler.
So we got that coming up. We got a game day podcast returning. We got the Rocky Top Rewind starting this Sunday. The Rocky Top Roundtable will be back next week. All your favorite content items, the matchup piece, all that and more. That is coming up next week for game week and throughout the foreseeable future. Can't thank you enough for being here. Austin Price, Brent Hubbs, Rob Lewis, I'm Eric Kane. As always, a big thank you to Exterior Home Solutions for making all this possible. Give them a call today for a free estimate at 865-524-5888 or visit them online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. Like this video, subscribe to Volquest on the YouTube channel if you haven't already. If you're watching this or listening to this and you're not a member of Volquest.com, you better join the party soon. The season is here. This is the Volquest Podcast.